Hi.
Hello.
Long time no see.
Right?
I know, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was just like, I died a little inside when the Instagram didn't save, and I was like, oh no, it was such a good interview. So thank you again for coming on again.
Yeah, yeah, of course. We gotta keep it fresh this
Oh yeah,
time.
no, totally. Absolutely. Well, how are you doing today after, a couple hours since round
Yeah,
two?
good. Yeah, it's a good day. Yeah, not much to share on Thursdays.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had my lunch today was which one was it? Vistra, which is a meal delivery
Oh,
service.
nice.
Yeah, so that was
What's
kind
that like? Did it just come with all the ingredients or was it
of,
prepared?
it's just a heat it and eat it.
Oh, that's nice. I
Yeah,
like that.
so super fast. But it was vegan and it was actually really tasty.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been trying to like take Elaine's recommendation. Shout out to Elaine on the sunbasket thing because I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
that sounds awesome.
Yeah. It's
Very
definitely,
nice.
see, first lesson, outsource the things that you're
Exactly.
important.
No, totally. Anyways, well, welcome everyone. Thanks again for tuning in. So every Tuesdays and Thursdays, I always have these. It used to be called High Achieving Hustlers interviews, but I've now changed it to the boss interviews. So I made that announcement on my last one. But this is round two. So had some tech issues earlier and unfortunately didn't save. Died a little inside, but I'm just super happy. And again, it's like you said, second time we get to talk. So this is going to be really good. Um, so yeah, we're just super excited to be able to just give as much value as we can to all of you young professionals, young photographers, entrepreneurs out there, and I'm super excited about today's guest. I'd love to introduce you all to the lovely Oriana. So she is an internationally published photographer, now based in Charleston, South Carolina. She photographs families, weddings, and retreats. She loves the ocean and the beach. Oriana is also launching a new coaching program for photographers to eliminate comparison and bring more ease and joy to their business. And I'm super excited about this just because, as I mentioned before, photography was actually my very, very first side hustle back in high school. So it's kind of crazy how this is all coming full circle now, but super excited to have you again on this Q&A today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and have the opportunity to talk to you.
Yay, awesome. So first of all, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you got started?
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I grew up in Chicago. My family's very international. So my mom is Peruvian, so I'm a Peruvian American. And I also have family in Panama and Japan.
Wow, that's so amazing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Chicago and I went to school for arts administration with a minor in business. So I had a whole career before I was a photographer.
Oh,
Yeah, I worked in
wow.
arts management and fundraising. So I always loved like speaking with visuals and storytelling with visuals and with fundraising and with the arts too. I really loved the personal relationship building. So those have always been two of my passions. But I never knew that I would be a photographer. And then I did start to oversee some of the photo shoots in our marketing department and hiring photographers. And like, that's when I was like, oh, wait,
Yes.
maybe this is something I could do that I want to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I took a trip to Costa Rica. And at the same time, I started working with my very first life and business coach. And I think those two things happening around the same time, as cliche as it is too, like I took a trip to Costa Rica and it changed my life. But that's exactly what happened.
It sounds like paradise. Like, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, it's pretty great. It's pretty great there. Oh my gosh, I can't talk about travel right now though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got back from that trip and I was talking to my coach and I really wanted to bring more of the feeling that I felt when I was surfing. I wanted to bring that into my life more, and it wasn't necessarily about surfing, even though I love being in the ocean, but it was about that feeling of mind, body, spirit connection, and really when you're feeling completely in the flow, right? And that's when I essentially started doing photography, because I realized that was another thing where I actually felt like I was using like all the different skills and personality and talents of me all at once, and I just felt really in the flow. So I took the leap and pursued that, and I ended up getting a job to go back to Costa Rica and work for a luxury surf resort. So that was my first professional photography job.
That's amazing. It all comes back full circle. Like,
it really does.
Um,
And then I did live and work in Costa Rica for a few years, and then I went back to Chicago and worked there for a couple of years, and now Charleston, South Carolina is my home.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh
Yeah.
gosh, it's so cool. Just because it's like, you always think that you're like set on this path, especially I know when you're like first starting out, you think this is what you're gonna do until like, those feelings start happening where you gotta shake it up a little bit and then it ends up being like, what you want to do. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, for me, so like way back in the day, when photography was like my very first side hustle, I remember like I didn't know it was going to be a thing for me, and it totally just happened by accident. And it was because like one of my classmates was like, "Oh, you're really good at taking portraits," and I was just like, "Oh no, I'm not that good. It's okay." And he's like, "I'll pay you," and I'm like, "Okay, well, we can totally make something out of this." But I know in the beginning, like I know it can be extremely hard to like figure out like what's your own style, and it's hard to like not compare yourself to everybody. You end up like trying to like copy or like trying to match somebody else's style. What advice do you have for new photographers trying to figure out their own style, or if they're just getting started, where should they pay most attention to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Gosh, when you first are starting in photography, I think honestly, one of my biggest pieces of advice is to photograph a lot and to photograph lots of different things, and to pay attention to how you feel and what you like to photograph, and not to so photograph a lot and identify the thing that lights you up and like what makes you feel good, and like actually really take the time to reflect on that. But don't be afraid to try different things, because honestly, once you get further along in your photography and as a business, you don't always have the opportunity to do that. You kind of have like your niche and your system in place.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, I love these comments.
Yeah, document, love that, enjoy the process.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
true.
And another thing is, don't be too focused in, like you mentioned, comparison, right? So I think it's totally awesome to like look up to mentors, obviously learn from people who are ahead of you, but don't be too focused on trying to copy someone else, and definitely don't be too focused on trends.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. If you had tried photography, as you mentioned, when you were in high school, that the trends of what's popular now is very different.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And if you just try to make your photography about what's trendy, like it's going to change. And you're an artist as a photographer, so you're going to be a lot more successful when you tap into the thing that lights you up and you don't focus on the external comparison or trends.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Well, and it goes back to like, making it fun, because at the end of the day, it's like for you and you get to be creative, It's not like you have to be like a clone or a copy of somebody, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Totally.
And if you are making it a business, like you will be so much more successful when you find the thing that is like your unique strength, and you'll get so much more energy from that too.
Yeah, 100%. No, that's awesome. I think it was so Crystal, one of our mastermind sisters, she challenged me on this too. She was like, even though you don't think you're creative, you're still being creative just by like, going out and like trying different things, which is always like a good thing, because like, when you can be more creative, you're more in flow, like you said, right? Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, so, kind of on the same topic of, that mindset piece, why do you think mindset is super important to building a successful business, especially, like I know with like photography, you want to stay in that creative space, but at the same time, you have to run, the business side of it too, right? Why do you think mindset's really important?
Yeah, mindset is like the most important thing. And yeah, I feel like we probably talked about, we probably will bring this up again, and we talked about it earlier, but like I just wish so much that I could have gone back to my like earlier self and been like, please, like get a coach with a mindset first, like before you worry so much about like what's the next best lens, what's the next best camera body, like this up here is your absolute best tool, like way more important than your camera and your lens is what's here. So focusing on your mindset is so important. The knowledge that you have, the confidence in yourself, as well as, when you are making that jump from photography as maybe a hobby or a side hustle to more of a serious business, really having that CEO mindset. Those aren't necessarily, I have a minor in business, right? Yeah, and I worked in arts administration, and yet translating that to a creative photography business honestly, it wasn't that easy. Like just because we're good at being a photographer doesn't necessarily mean that we're good at being the CEO of our
Yeah.
business. Yeah. So, educating yourself on your CEO mindset is going to help you so much.
That's
I
awesome.
kind of forgot the question.
No, no worries. Why mindset's important, so
Okay.
you definitely hit on a lot of those. So going back to the CEO mindset, because I've never actually heard it phrased that way. So like when you brought it up, that's the first time I've heard about it that way. What does that look like for you? Do you spend like a week doing CEO stuff, a month doing CEO stuff, or do you like me? I kind of compartmentalize things, and that's how I prefer to do things. But yeah, what does it look like for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, I work best when I'm collaborating and communicating with others. So one of my main ways that I make sure that I'm doing my bigger picture thinking, that I'm working on my business, on the bigger picture, and not just doing the client work and being like kind of in the nitty gritty all the time, is honestly with my coaches and with my mastermind. I have 2 different coaches that I work with, and those are hours each week that I know are set aside, that if I am getting a little too lost in the day-to-day, that they're going to help give me perspective and make sure that I'm looking at my quarterly goals, my annual goals. That's really big for me. And I know we both have coaches, so
oh yeah, totally.
yeah. And that makes it easy for me. That makes it easy for me because I'm collaborating with another person and it's on the calendar. And then another thing that is hugely important is managing your own energy. So for me, like as a CEO, managing my own energy, and that one took me a while to learn. So I honestly, I was kind of a workaholic. And so I just like,
same.
Yeah. Like I just thought if I was working, that was like inherently positive.
So you probably like booked like back to back, like appointment after appointment.
Yeah. And just like not necessarily like, yes. Or, not necessarily wanting to say no to something and push it out away. And oops, it froze for a second, but I think it's okay. And so or just like honestly, it's like when you do something you're passionate about, sometimes it feels kind of easy and fun to just like keep working. So I mean that's good, but one thing that I have learned in terms of the CEO mindset is that my energy, again up here, but all my energy it's absolutely critical to growing my business. And so I used to kind of think like, oh, it was kind of like fun, like if I would do something just for me. But now, like, no, like you have to fill your tank. I know it's cliche, but like it's 100% true. Like you have to take the time to fill your tank because otherwise you are, you're really just going to get lost in like the daily or the low level stuff. And you won't necessarily know how to like pour into the bigger picture.
Oh, 100%. I love that you brought that up. I call it the busy trap, right? We end up like getting stuck in all these other things. And, when really you have to focus on like you and what's up here. That's awesome. Very good. Going back to what you said too about like, the mentorship and getting coaches and stuff too. I think, I just want to and pay a nod to that too, just because like, so for those of you tuning in and catching the replay, Oriana is actually one of my mastermind sisters, and that's how we met. But it's just been really awesome, like, being in this community together and like glowing and growing together as, we're working through things. Just because like, it does feel quite lonely sometimes working on some of that CEO stuff as well. But, I definitely want to pay a nod to that too, is that when you work with a mentor and you start like coaching with other people, I think that's really important because you constantly have to like invest in yourself and invest in what's up here versus like all the new equipment and the software and all the gear, so definitely want to pay a nod to that.
Although I mean it's tempting. New mirrorless camera, and I'm eyeing it like
well, so let's talk about that. I know it can be hard, like not to get caught up in all the new things and like, shiny object syndrome, right? What should new and seasoned photographers be focusing on versus, like all the new gear and the equipment and the software and
Yeah, definitely. Because I do feel like, right, even as a seasoned photographer, like I will get into like these modes where I'm like, ooh, what new thing can I get? And I definitely feel like, I get questions from new photographers that are like, what lens are you using? Is this camera okay? X, Y, Z. And I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but like as long as you have like a certain level of gear of like competence, like competent gear, Like, honestly, again, the next thing I think to invest in is your self-education. Like, and like your self-education, and maybe, well, I guess maybe not if you're brand new. I was actually going to say outsourcing, but I don't know that that's true. Like if you're brand new.
Oh, yeah. No, I'd agree. I feel like you have to put in the grind and at least like, do the work, and then you can fill in the gaps with the outsourcing. But no, I totally agree.
Yeah. But education, so like learning from other photographers, and then investing in your business, like investing in your mindset, investing in a coach. I would say that those are more important. And again, I wish I had known that earlier. So oh yeah, I shared that one story about my first photography coach that I worked with.
Oh
yeah. So when I was living in a really little town, and there weren't many other photographers, and I actually hired a coach who was far away from me in a different place, and she just helped me kind of take a holistic look at my business. And from a financial standpoint mostly, and like through her I learned about like, oh my gosh, like cost of doing business that I just wasn't taking into account. I wasn't taking into account. So I mean, if you really looked at like the long-term survivability of my business, like it wasn't a business, it was a hobby, like in the beginning, and the photographers around me, I basically copied what they were charging, which was not a lot. It was very, very low. And, I just compared, and I was like, okay, great. That's what I'll do. And then I worked with her, and she helped me basically like quadruple my prices. And
amazing.
And if I hadn't worked with her and I had just continued to compare or look around my market, like I wouldn't have done that. And it's not necessarily just about raising your prices, but it's like working with somebody that's making it personal to you, and personal to what you're offering, and personal to what you need to be a sustainable business. Like it isn't just about like what you see on someone else's website, or what their prices are, or what, or what their market can bear. I mean, like we're entrepreneurs really, and we're creatives, like what the market can bear, like nobody's made your photography before.
No, I think that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Well, kind of going along those lines of, the comparison piece, what are your top 3 tips for improving your mindset and getting over that comparison?
Oof. Okay. Top 3 tips for improving your mindset and getting over that comparison. Ooh, man. Okay.
Always got the loaded questions for you.
Okay. Well, I don't know if they're like going to be the top 3, but well, one I would say is celebrate yourself. So
that's great.
Yeah, like if you don't celebrate yourself, who else is going to? So when you do have something to celebrate related to your photography or your business, like put it out there, like put it out there multiple times. Like, because no one else is like hearing things the same way you are. So like feel free to repeat yourself and like share stories. We're talking about, are we talking about mindset? Yes.
Yes, mindset. Yep.
Yes, mindset. I like to do an exercise where I ask you to, we won't do the whole thing now, but basically in summary, like I ask you to close your eyes, and I ask you to think of like an alternate timeline. So it's like an alternate world where what you offer, like your subjects, you and your service, like do not exist. And not only do they do not exist, but only the like total opposite exists, complete opposite. And to really go through and think of that. And then when you open your eyes, to write down what is it that you are bringing to this world. So and then making a mantra out of that, because I think when we remind ourselves like what we're bringing to the world and why it's so important, I mean, that just goes huge. Like
no, I think that's so powerful, and I want to pay a nod to the mantras too, just because it's like, everybody says do affirmations, right? But sometimes like those affirmations aren't for you, and they might not stick because they're not for you, right? I love what you said. If you go deeper and figure out, creating that mantra that's for you and what you bring to the world, it's going to make it stick and be so much more powerful too. That's awesome. Great tip. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about why community is important and why surrounding yourself with the right people is also very important? And not from a point of like, ditch your friends and get new friends, right? But from a standpoint of, like you said, right, where, if you end up staying in the same place or being around the same people, you may have never raised your prices, right? Because you said that your first coach was totally outside of that
Mm-hmm.
world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that community, one, photography can be it doesn't have to be, but it can be a really lonely profession
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah. I know I shared this story on my Instagram recently after talking to a friend. And right now is such a busy time for a lot of photographers. And it reminded me of a few years ago when I was so busy. I was so busy through the fall. And then I ended up burning out basically. And like, honestly, just having to step away, like, because I just like, I completely exhausted myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I had slowed down, I would have been farther ahead than if I let myself get burnt out. So I think it's not necessarily obvious how that connects to community, but it really does, because I think like sometimes when we get into that work phase, we don't have the perspective to like step out.
That's a great way to put it. I love that.
Yeah. And then also, having like peers who understand your industry or understand business, even if it's not exactly in your industry, people who can cheer you on, who can support you, who, can normalize some of the challenges or ups and downs of being a creative in business. I mean, that's so essential. And, we don't like it's like you mentioned friends earlier, and it's like your friends may or may not get it, or your family may or may not get it. And like, hopefully they're supportive, but they might not be. And that's actually pretty common too. And even if they are supportive, they might not really understand what it means to like be an entrepreneur or a creative entrepreneur, and what that takes, right? So having a community of somebody who's right there with you or who is a few steps ahead of you is going to give you that perspective and give you that sounding board. That's just so essential. I mean, we're social creatures, like, exactly. Like we need that to really reach our potential quicker.
No, that's such great feedback. And going back to the loneliness piece too, I definitely think that also applies, like, not just only for photographers, but also, sales professionals, entrepreneurs as well, just because it's like when you're in that hustle and just constantly going for it, you might end up like losing sight of, or like what you said, like losing that perspective. And I think that's like the best way of putting it, which I think is awesome. So I want to kind of like round it back to, kind of like the current situation. So, and say, going back to what you said too about like that connection and how we're like social creatures. I know it's probably even harder now, like, still being in the middle of this pandemic. What are your thoughts and, feedback for photographers now? Just because I know for some photographers, work has picked back up, but for some people are still in lockdown in other parts of the world. So like here in the UK anyways, there's a lot of big cities that are, completely in lockdown. So you aren't really allowed to do anything. What's your advice there?
Yeah, well, in terms of community, there are different groups that are going online right now. I know they're national in the US. I don't think they're international, but there is, if you are in the United States, there's a group called the Rising Tide Society, and they are all about community over competition. So yeah, they're pretty amazing. And I've actually seen the industry change from that group. Like, I feel like photographers are just way more open since that group has like really taken hold over the last few years. And they have virtual meetups now. Some of the chapters do. I have an accountability group.
Yes.
So I have a free accountability group, and the next cohort starts in November. So, I mean, that's just a way, to get support from me, and you get to sample my coaching in like a little bite size, and also to connect with other photographers in the group.
Awesome.
And that's open to anyone in the world.
Yes, and I'll definitely have your contact details linked here in the replay in the caption. So perfect segue. Can you tell us a little bit about your new coaching program, or is that still on the DL?
Like I was like, oh, maybe I should reveal it, but I'm not the details aren't quite ready to be revealed, but
No worries.
I am launching a new one-to-one coaching program that also will launch next month.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
okay.
So if you're interested in that, I would say to DM me, or you can find my contact info on my Instagram at Oriana Fowler. I can put you in the free accountability group in the meantime, or just wait and send you the information for the coaching launch, which will be in a few weeks.
That's awesome. Well, I know it's going to be amazing. So definitely, you know, like I would challenge any of you that are interested to get in touch with Oriana on this. Okay, so last question. I always love to end these Q&As with action steps. What is the one action step you would recommend for these photographers, sales professionals, or young entrepreneurs as it relates to improving their mindset today?
Well, I do want to share one thing just for photographers, and then maybe we can share for
Okay, yeah.
more general audience, if that's okay. Because I did want to share for photographers, one thing that you can do, including in lockdown, is if you haven't printed any of your photos recently, like in the last year, I would highly recommend choosing 3 photos and having them professionally printed, because there is something about holding your artwork, like holding your in your hand, and it's like separated from all of the digital noise that I think is just, it's just a huge reminder of like the talents and what you do. Yeah, and so now in lockdown, even if you're shooting or if you're not shooting, like that's a perfect thing to do, and to like put that in your office, right? Yeah, and have that kind of to be your mindset of like one of the reasons that you are doing what you do. You know, along those lines too, and I guess it's not pure mindset, but it is mindset, because it is related to growth mindset. And I think this can apply to anybody, is to ask for feedback. Ask for feedback from your clients.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like a gold mine right there. I feel like not
even getting into like the market research aspect, which is like a huge part of it. It's also so important because it's, honestly, it's empowering. It's empowering for you. You're more than likely going to hear really great things, and that's really important for you, like to know and to have, and to boost your confidence. And in those days when you're not really sure, you know, you can kind of again go back to some of those testimonials, and then it's also empowering because not only is it a confidence booster, but yes, like to your point, if you do get something that is maybe like less than stellar, that is the opportunity for you to grow, and like, thank goodness that you found out and you didn't
exactly.
you can consider that.
Absolutely.
And you know, and that's like a great way to like niche down on your strengths too. When you ask your clients for feedback, you'll find out what's working, what's not working, and you know, some of it you'll leave, some of it you'll take, but as you're doing that, you're refining more and more like the path that you want to be on. So it's really truly a growth mindset to do that. And like, I'm so surprised when I find out sometimes people don't do that.
And I think it's so powerful too. And going back to what you said too, like even if you get like, you know, feedback that's not super stellar, it kind of, it reminds me of what Oprah said one time. Oprah talks about how like, you know, on the days where it's just like really, really tough, you know, she's grateful that she at least even has like a mountain to climb, right? And it's like, you know, you at least have something to work on. And it's exactly going back to exactly what you said. It's just a perspective shift, right? So so Oriana and I were DMing before this because I was super bummed out about our first interview not saving, you know, but you know, you definitely like helped me have that perspective shift too. So thank you.
Of course.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for sharing so much wisdom, so much gold on this, you know, and I hope that, you know, all of you that are watching or catching the replay take a lot of notes. But please let me know your feedback as always. You know, what are your thoughts? If I should have Oriana again sometime. So for anybody that is more interested in learning from you or just getting in touch, how can they reach you?
So send me a DM on Instagram. You'll link to it here. And there's also a little sign up in my bio link too. So, but I'm an open book. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm all about community. Like, please reach out and connect with me.
Yes, I love that. Community over competition, always.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, very good. Thank you so much for being on here again today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. But I'll talk to you again soon.
So
Bye.
good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.